Welcome everybody to this Success and Leadership Breakfast. Wonderful to see a very big audience here this morning. My name is Mark Beyer. I'm the editor of Business News and I'll be your MC this morning. I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respect to their elders past and present. I'd like to welcome our special guest this morning, Richard Goyder, one of Western Australia's most successful and respected business leaders, also someone in the midst of a major career change, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing a lot more from Richard later this morning, so please make him welcome. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our Success and Leadership Series host sponsor, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and to our series sponsors, health insurer Bupa, the team from EY, St Vincent de Paul Society, WA Super. Also a welcome this morning to Brian Burke Homes, a new sponsor for this event. I hope you saw the images out in the lobby, and there's some very impressive brochures on the tables showing what they can do. And if you want to learn more, the team from Brian Burke Homes is on table number 8. And good morning to the team from Churchill Consulting. Todd Mayers will be conducting the vote of thanks this morning. And thanks also to the Hyatt Regency for hosting this event. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. This is our third Success and Leadership Breakfast, our third breakfast this year. They've covered a very wide range of subjects. In February, we had a property panel where we had some experts discussing where that market was heading. In April, we held a breakfast in conjunction with the World Wide Web Conference with speakers from Google, Wikipedia, LinkedIn and Snap Inc. And for our next breakfast, we've secured Mike McKenna, the Chief Executive of Perth Stadium. Mike is with us this morning. That breakfast is on Wednesday, September the 20th. I'm sure Mike will have a lot to discuss and tickets are now on sale. Something else coming up is our annual 40 Under 40 Awards. We've been running these awards since 2002. They're a fantastic way of acknowledging high achievers under the age of 40 right across the business community here in Western Australia. So if you'd like to learn more about it, please speak to one of our staff. And if you know someone who fits that category, please think about nominating them. Now, something new that we've recently done that I'd like to mention briefly, we've partnered with BDO to launch a remuneration report. Now, we believe the granular detail in this report is unsurpassed in the market. It covers 900 listed companies. It's broken down by company size and to a wide range of roles and professions. And it's available for purchase through the Business News website. Now, if you'd like to see a list of guests who are here, we've got just over 400 people. You can browse to the URL that can be found on your program. If you've got a question that you'd like to put to Richard Goyder this morning, you can tweet or send a text message. And of course, during the Q&A, we'll have roving microphones. So if you'd like to stand up and ask a question, we welcome that as well. Breakfast will be served shortly, at which time we'll be collecting business cards for the door prize. The Hyatt has donated one night's accommodation in a Hyatt Regency Club King Room, plus breakfast for 2. And we'll also be inviting you to participate in a very brief survey a little later after the event so we can get your feedback. I'll be back just before 8 o'clock and we'll wrap up just before 9 o'clock. In the meantime, please enjoy your breakfast.
Innovation starts by asking questions. Can changing one small thing change everything? Can a different perspective help? Can the answer you're looking for be a question? So here's one for you. Can your bank help your business innovate? CommBank can.
Hope you've all enjoyed your breakfast. It's time now to get underway with the main part of the morning. I'd like to thank again our host sponsor, the Commonwealth Bank, and all of our series sponsors. As usual, this morning's presentation will be in a Q&A format, and asking the questions will be my colleague, Mark Pownall. Mark has been with Business News nearly 17 years. He's made an enormous contribution over that time on the content side, and this month commenced a new role as Chief Executive. So I think as Mark makes his way to his seat, I think a little welcome for Mark. Now, introducing Richard Goyder is challenging because Richard has achieved an awful lot over the course of his career, and he's still midway through that very successful career. Richard will shortly come to the end of a very successful 12-year term as Managing Director of Wesfarmers, Australia's 8th largest listed company, Australia's largest private sector employer, and in many respects a role model for being a good corporate citizen. He's been very active in policy forums in recent years through the Business Council of Australia and as chair of the Australian B20, the business advisory group for the G20 summit in 2014. Richard is chairman of JRDF Australia, a global leader in funding diabetes research, and a member of the Centre for Workplace Leadership Advisory Group. He's chairman of the AFL, chairman-elect of Woodside Petroleum, and also planning to join the board of Qantas. So a lot to discuss. Please make him welcome. And don't forget, you can tweet or text your questions in. And now I'll hand over to Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Welcome, Richard.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
That's good.
Not such a lovely morning, but a great crowd here.
I've got a bit of a lurgy, but I'm feeling pretty good because we've got our audit closeout meeting at 10 o'clock this morning, and the audit partner's here, so I reckon that's a good sign.
It's covered off. I like it. Well, look, welcome on stage. Thanks for joining us. I thought maybe just to kick things off, I'd love to talk about this transition that you're in. From CEO Wesfarmers. Really, there was some discussion around that outside of the outside world almost late last year, and it seems to have been sort of a year-long process announced in February and going to happen in November. So, how is that going? And how does handing over responsibilities actually work over such a time period?
Well, it's going well because I think Rob Scott is going to be an outstanding CEO, and I'm delighted that he'll take over. He'll be the 8th CEO in Wesfarmers' 103-4-year history. And Rob and I are working. We would always hope that succession in Wesfarmers is seamless, and we're working seamlessly together. And Rob, Michael Chaney, who's the chairman, and I are doing the same. Rob was running the industrials business through to the end of June. He's now spent a bit more time in Perth. He's got to relocate his family to Perth later in the year as well. But he's got this great time that I'm trying to help facilitate, where he's not the decision maker, although I would engage him in every decision we make. But he's not under the microscope, and he can talk to people inside the company, outside the company, shareholders, customers, other people, and start building towards when he takes over. So when I took over from Mike, we had 15 months, and people said to me, "That's crazy," but actually it was the best preparation to take over as CEO. Rob will have whatever it is, 9 months, and I think he'll be as prepared as you can be. It's still a bit of a sticker shock when you actually you're in the seat and you look around and there's people looking at you and you think, oh, I've got to now do this sort of stuff. But I think he'll be a great CEO, well prepared, and meanwhile things in the company are rolling along pretty well.
And there's no doubt in people's minds in the company as to who to go to get a decision.
No, it works pretty well, I think. Rob and I just. I copy him on everything, he copies me on everything. Georgina, who looks after us, and works that well. So it is seamless, and there's no ego. I think is one of the key things, and we've got a lot to do. We've got full year results. There's a lot going on in our various businesses, and it's really important that the company doesn't lose momentum through this time. In fact, my hope is that the company momentum picks up, and come mid-November I can sort of just quietly exit through the side door.
And what are the, you know, the 1 or 2 or 5 major tips that you give Rob? You know, what are the key kind of transition moments?
Yeah, I've got a list going actually with him, so there's more than 4 or 5.
Right.
But if he remembers 4 or 5, that'll be good. A few would be the microphone's always on. And I've forgotten that from time to time. But as CEO, people take a bit more notice of what you say in an internal or external environment. I remember after we took over Coles, I once described Kmart as a dog of a business, and the Kmart employees remind me of that all the time. Another incident was I was talking to a group of, we were trying to sell the Wesfarmers takeover of Coles to the market, and there's a fair bit of Wesfarmers scrip involved in it. And so I was talking to a group from one of the investment banks about it, and again forgot that adage, the microphone's always on. And had a conversation with Archie Norman, who's been our advisor on this the day before, and Archie had said, you know, Richard, you'll probably end up changing out about 3/4 of the management team because you'll need to bring that cultural change to Coles. So I said to this group, we'll probably end up changing out 3/4 of the management team. Well, the next day this was in Sydney, next day I was down in Melbourne at Taronga at the Coles head office, and almost on every desk there was a financial review open at the page which says Goyder to sack 3/4 of Coles management team. So the second one would be, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Rob's an Olympic athlete, 2 times Olympic athlete, and I think he'd probably know that better than me. The third one would be, you think you're the boss, and that's a big mistake. I mean, your diary is subject to the whims of your EA and everyone else, and you've actually got lots of bosses, from the board to your shareholders to customers to everyone else. So they would be a few, and somehow finding a balance between maintaining your personal life, doing your job, maintaining the appropriate external commitments, but being able to focus on the things you need to focus on to achieve what the business wants to achieve. That's a juggling act that he'll have to sort his way through a bit.
I get it. And look, just finally on that transition, you've had a number of management changes already. Apart from yourself going, there's others, people.
Yeah.
So how does that process go? Is that something that Rob's also involved with? Because they're people he's going to be working closely with.
Yeah. So the incoming decisions are all Rob's now. If he wants my advice, I'll give it, but that's all Rob's. And I think, Mark, in this sort of succession, and Wesfarmers, you know, Trevor was CEO for 8 or 9 years, Mike for 13, me for 12 and a bit or whatever. You either got to make a decision that you go when there's a bit of a change of the team coming, or you go before that, or you bring in a new team. In my view, this time round, you know, so John Gillam's retiring, Terry's moving on, I'm moving on, and that enables Rob to bring in some new people, and you know, again, that's all been pretty well planned.
Yeah, no, and seemed to have been well managed from the outside looking in. Look, let's move on to like one of the fun subjects I think is the retail world that Wesfarmers has become, largely under your stewardship. Lot of challenges there, which we talk about regularly in the papers and the media. Low-cost foreign entrants coming in, and then you've got this sort of Amazon coming over the top of that. Which of these do you see as the greater threat, and how's Wesfarmers placed to deal with it?
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I think the Amazon thing's now been overblown, and I take some responsibility of that because, you know, a few years ago someone said, who's your biggest competitor? And I said, we should all be worried about Amazon. And in a sense, we should, but I mean, we've had competitors and have competitors every day of our existence, and that'll continue. And good competitors make you sharper and make an industry more dynamic and creative and innovative and all those sort of things. And Amazon's an amazing company, and what they've done is phenomenal. But it's about great customer service, delivering customers what they want, and using technology to deliver that. So I reckon we're in a pretty good starting point. You know, we've got 3,000 or 4,000 places around Australia. We've probably got the biggest logistics network of any business almost in Australia. We've got great people, we've got a brilliant balance sheet, and we've already got $60-odd billion of revenue. So we're not in a bad starting point to take on anyone, as we proved against Masters and other competitors that have come our way. So, we're up for the fight. We're looking forward to it, and all I keep banging away is that we were just like a level playing field. So, fuel, Coles has just opened. Do you think Amazon's going to look at their clock every day and say it's 5 to 8 in Perth, so we can't trade? I don't think they're going to do that.
No.
And so all I want is the capacity to operate our business the same way they and every other competitor is going to operate their business, which is make it a level playing field between all players, and let us get on with it. Let us employ local people. Let us invest locally, invest with our local suppliers, and pay taxes here. And I think that'll be a great outcome for our customers and for Australia generally. I think the whole the technology thing I think is exciting. To me, it's one of the things that is going to be really interesting in the businesses I'll be involved in the future is how technology changes that. But I was saying to you earlier, I think driverless cars, energy storage, those sort of things. If we do this again in 10 years' time, I think we'll be talking about a lot of things that have changed dramatically the way we do things, and that's exciting. At the same time, it's going to challenge a lot of business models.
In fact, be interesting to know in your period as CEO, and I guess prior to that, the level of expenditure on technology within the business would have changed dramatically.
Yeah, and I think it'll ratchet up more. And some of that's enabling technology and some of that's protective technology. The whole cyber security thing is, from being a buzzword a few years ago is now, significant spend just to protect you and your customers' data and things like that.
Yep.
But the technology, I talked earlier about our logistics network. So if you think about it, think about Bunnings, Coles, Kmart, Target, Officeworks, Blackwoods in most towns around Australia. We've got this phenomenal network. So my challenge to the business is how do we now use technology to make that the most efficient, cost-efficient network around the country so that no one can compete with us, or that we're better than anyone anyway. Yeah. And technology will do that.
Gotcha. And you mentioned, staff. You're the biggest private employer in the country, I think. A lot of those would be in your retail world. That can be an advantage, but it can also be a big disadvantage when you've got some of those rules apply to how staff can work and what you can pay them when your potential competitors don't have the same problem, do they?
Yeah, it can. And I think we're going to be faced with some really interesting questions, Mark, because I was at a Microsoft thing a year or two ago, and Bill Gates talked about robots doing jobs at equivalent of $2 an hour. And so, as in business, particularly in public companies, unfortunately you're judged by your last set of results, and certainly you're judged by your momentum in your results and outlook and results. And so if you can swap out labour at $20 or $30 an hour for $2 an hour, that's going to be a fairly compelling financial thing to do, but there's a lot of consequences of that. Significant consequences. So I think that's something that people are going to have to grapple with, not just businesses like ours, but a lot of others. So I think that's a big deal. But on the other hand, I'd say Australia's an unbelievably good country, a great place to live and work, and I think we should be a high-wage country. I think this debate about lowering wages, I don't get. Now, look at me. But it's not my crusade to pay our people in our retail businesses less. My crusade would be pay them more, make sure we get efficiencies in doing it. And we should want to be a high wage, high standard of living, high standard of education country. So how we deal with that transition is, I think, going to be really fascinating. With robotics and artificial intelligence and the like. And it won't. I don't think it'll be like a tidal wave, but I think it's going to be significant.
Yeah, well, it will be fascinating, and I guess we've already seen it with manufacturing to a degree. So.
Yeah, but the thing is, as manufacturing's diminished in this country, the service sector and others have flourished. So, I sort of have confidence that we'll find things.
Something will come to fill the gap.
Yeah, and I'm a farm boy, and I tell you, that's looking pretty good too. Farming's looking all right at the moment.
And do your different businesses, retail businesses, get affected differently? I mean, I imagine Bunnings doesn't get quite the same, people don't quite call up the home delivery model.
I think we kid ourselves if we think we're immune. So that, they are affected differently. Fresh food's going to be different to just staples, is going to be different to stationery, and that'll be different. And fashion's going to be quite different. So the business will be affected differently. But I mean, you look at Target and the impact Target's had from new international players, Zara, H&M, those ASOS, those players, and then digital, and that can show you what can happen quickly if you're not ready for it.
And yet, one of the big decisions you've made in the last year or so is to go into Britain with hardware into shops. So you're not trying to go and take a digital model elsewhere.
No, we think it's interesting because Amazon's now building stores. So we actually think creating an environment where people want to come is really important. And one of the things that's resonated, we've just opened I think it's our 6th, we've just opened Folkestone, 5th or 6th Bunnings warehouse in the UK yesterday. One of the things that's resonating with our customers in the UK is a coffee shop and a playground for kids. Right. So it's a destination. And that's what, so people talk about Bunnings here, sausage sizzles, coffee shops, playgrounds, those sort of things. And if you can create the theatre and a destination, that helps a lot. But one of the things that attracted us to Homebase in the UK is that it has a not insignificant online sales, digital sales platform. Okay. And we want to learn from that and see what we can do here. So again, it's about satisfying the customer. And so, Bunnings has been a CEO's dream. Mike Chaney said that when he finished. And I tell you, for me, if you look at what Bunnings has done to Wesfarmers, it's been absolute CEO's dream. And I think Rob's got, I think Bunnings has got a long way to go yet.
I appreciate that. Now, Wesfarmers has a model, a return on investment model where they you make all these decisions based on that. Does that change at all when you go to move your footprint from Australia to a distant location like Britain? Is it just the same model, or does it come with some other, do you have to layer that?
We layered it in our evaluation, so we think, well, this will be harder because it's further away, and then there's cultural issues and, across tax issues and all those sorts. So inevitably your investment hurdle rate goes up, or for us, it goes up because of the complexity. But no, if you walked into one of our stores in the UK, you'd say, that's a Bunnings store. And then if the people running it, PJ Davis, Rodney Boys, an ex-CEO and CFO of the Bunnings Australia business. And one of the things we're doing is we're bringing a whole lot of the Bunnings UK home-based people out to Australia, particularly the store managers, to go through how we want the stores managed, the customer interface, but also return on capital and gross margin, return on inventory, and those things that are fundamental to that business. And if we can, it'd be easy to get carried away with how good these stores in the UK are looking. But I was really pleased the other day we had a Bunnings UK board meeting, and the real focus was what's our return on capital? What's the NPV of this business going to be like? So it's pure Wesfarmers.
Right, it's filtering down. And in all that process of making that decision, was Brexit a factor that you were prepared for?
No. We took it into account. But, I like most people, we thought it was a low likelihood. Well, that's not to say we totally dismissed it. Our view is that the home improvement sector is pretty resilient, and actually in a time of an economic downturn can work pretty well. We've seen that in Australia a lot. So the economic cycles Bunnings has been through, it tends to be when people stop spending, stop travel and things like that, discretionary spend, they go to Bunnings and they buy paint or they buy home improvement stuff so they can spend their weekends at home doing things. So that works well for us. But I mean, to be perfectly honest, we thought the likelihood wasn't significant. Since the vote, the UK economy's actually surprised people on the upside, but I think there's more to come on that as the negotiations unfold and what the impacts are for various sectors in the UK that may or may not stay based in the UK. But time will tell on that. We think our future in the UK is very much in our hands.
I appreciate that. Now, Richard, I'm going to talk about what you're getting into next a bit, and sport's obviously a big thing that you're doing. You've taken over chair of the AFL, and it's a major player. It's an industry, really.
Yeah, it's a big industry. And
how much work does that entail already?
As much as you want, in a sense. But I'm pretty clear I'm chair. I'm not CEO, and we've got an outstanding CEO in Gil McLaughlin. So we at the moment have 10 or 11 scheduled commission meetings a year. I'll reduce that. We'll reduce that to 8 next year, because the burden is on management actually to prepare for all these meetings. So we'll scale that. We might make them longer, but we'll scale that back a bit. So that's not a significant thing. There's an expectation that you go to games. Well, I love footy, so that's not a problem. And Janine does as well. So last Friday we're at Adelaide Oval for the Adelaide Geelong game, and then Saturday we're at Melbourne Port Adelaide, and Sunday we're at Richmond GWS. Great weekend of footy. Right. I think we've had a 5-game weekend, so that was earlier this year. So Janine really does love footy, or she loves me, or both. I'm not sure. So there's that, and of course you can't go in a pair of jeans and just watch the footy. There's engagement, and people are loving me about the AFLW women's team, all that sort of stuff. And then there's moments like a couple of weeks ago that come along that require just a bit more attention. So I mean, my diary is mixed up with has always been mixed up with a whole lot of internal and external things. Occasionally, when these things come along, some of the external things, there'll be people in this room who've had me shift a meeting or whatever. It's because something comes up, and you've just got to put your attention to it, because it's in the scheme of things, at the time it may have some reputational impacts, so you've got to deal with it. But it's not a big deal, but it's fun.
No, I appreciate that. Look, you mentioned the events of the last week or so, and there's lots of questions, Twitter questions it looks like, that are kind of reflecting around some of the things that you've got to deal with, both positively and negatively. But do you think, with the headlines that we've seen, that football has got there's more involvement about community expectations and standards? Is it different from the corporate sector, or are sports like footy and corporate leaders like Wesfarmers sort of expected to play more of a leadership role on social issues?
Yeah, I mean, I was reported yesterday saying we do not set ourselves up as the pillar of morality for the AFL, nor Wesfarmers. And that's because we constantly make mistakes, and we constantly don't meet our own standards. But you do have to have standards, and you do have to try and aspire to meet those standards. And where you don't, then you have to deal with them. And I can give you a litany of things that have happened in Wesfarmers, and I give you a litany of things that happen in the AFL.
And go ahead.
No. But I mean, think about it. But the AFL, and as I said, in AFL men and women, you've got elite sportsmen and women who, by their nature, are risk takers, and as a consequence, stuff happens, and we see that almost every week when people do stuff on field, and we've seen it almost every year when people do stuff off field. And Wesfarmers is no different. We push too hard on one spot, and whether that's with suppliers or whatever. And so to me, culturally, the thing is how do you deal with it, and do you deal with it appropriately, and do you keep the values of your organisation intact, and most importantly, try and build over time, build your reputation. I think the AFL's in a special place because of our place in the community. And if you look back 10 years and look forward 10 years, particularly in country areas, but also in suburban areas, football clubs are one of the glues that are holding communities together in country with diminishing populations. So I think it's incredibly important that football thrives in those areas, and that'll happen if we're inclusive, if men, women, boys, girls all want to be involved, and if there's real community support, and by that I mean all the volunteers and the like. So you do have to think about the standards of behaviour you have as an organisation, because if people see that and they say, I don't want to be involved in that, then there's a consequence. And we've got an opportunity, because of the media rights deal we've done and other things, we've got an opportunity to entrench Australian rules football across Australia, not just at the elite level, but in community level, and that's something we really want to do.
And there was a question there about your vision as AFL chairman.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that the chairman has all the vision.
Yeah,
but
Gil's vision is much more important than mine.
So what do you think is the kind of Goyder era of chair? What are you thinking is going to be playing out?
Mark, I'm not one to think Goyder era. That's rubbish, I reckon. But I would hope through Gil's time as CEO that we entrench AFL as the most exciting, dynamic, popular, engaged sport in this country, and we look to expand and grow it as well. And part of that, which we already started on, is ensure that we end up with an unbelievably good women's competition, and it's amazing. I mean, the numbers of young girls who now want to play AFL footy, it's one of the biggest challenges we've got is to provide the facilities and the infrastructure and the coaching for these people, which is just
clubhouses with girls' toilets.
It's so exciting. It's fantastic.
I understand. Sorry, there was a good question there before.
It was up there, but
sorry, I was a bit slow on that one. Yeah, just what's your advice to the Cricket Australia at the moment?
It says this from Peter Kennedy.
Thanks, Peter.
My advice is, I mean, Bob Avery, who was my chairman's on the board of Cricket Australia, the last. I hope they can sort it out. You know what, Mark? What I would say, and this doesn't go to cricket at all, that with the CBA collective bargaining agreement we did with the AFL players recently, it is a lot easier when the pot is bigger. So we did a good media rights deal. We've got the clubs are generally going pretty well at the moment in terms of their revenues. There's other things that are going reasonably well. When the pot is bigger, when the pie is bigger, gee, it's much easier to come up with a sharing thing. And that, to me, that goes to the broader economy. Yep. It's when it tightens up that you're going to have real issues. Right. And the other thing about negotiations is my experience would be when people get entrenched in a particular position and don't have a way out, that creates a problem. Yes. And we found our way through particular issues with the Players Association, came out with, I think, a really good outcome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Mark, I've bought tickets for our kids to go to the Boxing Day test in Melbourne, so they better bloody sort it out.
Now, just, you're going from, and I appreciate how you deflect that to it's the AFL's chief executive's job. You're transitioning from executive to board. Yeah. How do you prepare yourself for that change? Because you're used to making the decisions, or at least saying this is what we're going to do and getting approval for that versus the opposite. Yeah, I think Wesfarmers helps because I chair most of our divisional boards, and so I think there's a sort of a halfway house at Wesfarmers, which at least you have some understanding of the role. And I've been blessed to have three outstanding chair, myself, Trevor Eastwood, Bob Avery, and now Michael Chaney. So there's some pretty good role models there. And I've been involved in a number of other organisations and sat around board tables or whatever and seen different models. So I think that is good. And I'll just have to watch myself, and
I've always had good people around me, and I've had people whose opinions I value a lot. And one of the things I'll have to watch myself is I don't overreach. But I suspect the CEOs that I'm dealing with will tell me that.
I was going to say, you've got plenty of people to remind you.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And look, we mentioned before we've got our own remuneration report, and there's a question there about remuneration. I mean, what do you think about as you shift to the board side of things? What do you feel about?
I think directors are totally underpaid. No, I say that in jest for any. Where's Sean Smith? Sean, that was in jest. I said yesterday at a round table that I sincerely, there was headlines when Rob was appointed, not that Rob's got outstanding pedigree to take over as CEO of Wesfarmers. It was Rob's got to be paid less than Richard Goyder at Wesfarmers. That was a headline. My sincere hope is that Rob is paid more than me. And the reason I say that is because if he is, as a shareholder, I know I'm going to be really happy. Yep. Because the company will have performed well. So I get the debate on remuneration. I actually think this is now well in hand in public company space, because I think shareholders, large and small, are having a significant say in levels of remuneration, particularly incentives and base remuneration and exit arrangements. And so I do think there's moderation. There will be outliers, but usually that'll be coincident with outstanding performance. And often from a business that hasn't performed well and all of a sudden, for a variety of reasons, things have turned around.
Gotcha.
And the CEO's, as a consequence, well paid. For what it's worth, Mark, I would hope that in our public companies we can attract the best talent. And remuneration's part of that, because you just know when it is a war for talent. And we're competing with private equity, we're competing with investment banks, we're competing with lawyers, accountants, professional firms, and so like it or not, there's a degree. Remuneration is one of the things that will attract people, and I hope we can always have remuneration arrangements that attract the best talent to companies like Wesfarmers. Ian McLeod was on almost a private equity type of deal. Salary deal with Wesfarmers, and I have never had a meeting with a shareholder in Wesfarmers who objected to Ian's remuneration arrangements because of the turnaround that was achieved in Coles and the shareholder value that was created. Right. So Ian was paid, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars, but there were tens of billions of dollars of value created in Coles. So
yeah, that's a good deal.
Yeah, it's a good deal.
Look, sort of a neat segue, I think. We've got just. For everybody out there, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes, and then I'm going to open to questions. So I always find with a big room, we have less questions. People don't like to make that first one, so I encourage people to think about that. There'll be some roving microphones. But look, I'd like to talk about West Australia, and I guess, we've hopefully hit the bottom. I'd love to hear your view on that. And I guess, in terms of competing for talent, we need to get the right people here too for the state. So I'm interested in your view of the state of play and the challenges ahead for WA.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever quite as good as it might seem, or quite as bad as it might seem. And obviously it can be bad when as a consequence of the economy, you've lost your job or whatever. Those things are seriously bad. But when people talk about the rate of growth or lack of growth in WA, they're talking about we've come off a big high base. So sometimes we shouldn't forget this is an unbelievably good place to live and work, and for those of us who get to travel to other places, you come back here and you think, this is extraordinarily good. Yep. But we have some challenges. I'm pretty positive about that. Clearly the government's got some fiscal challenges and they need to be dealt with over time. Growth is the best answer for that. Getting economic growth domestic in WA and nationally should be a priority of all governments and non-government, business sector. We had Business Council in Perth a couple of weeks ago doing some joint events with CCI, WA, and I was really encouraged particularly talking to the major mining companies about the level of investment they will continue to be making, both in capital but also R&M and the like. I think some of the innovation that's happening here at the moment is really exciting. And I'd have...
Sorry, in what areas?
Oh, I think, I mean, so I'm yet to be fully exposed, but some of the work Woodside's doing, for example, on robotics looks, you know, and some of the work that I think battery technology and others, you know, WA I think has got a brilliant tertiary sector which we should really encourage and grow and prosper. So I think agriculture and innovation agriculture is going ahead in leaps and bounds as well. So I'm pretty positive. I mean, we're enriched with great natural assets, talented, well-educated people, and we're the doorstep of the biggest growth economies of the world. So that's pretty good. And we've got a 60,000 seat stadium opening up in a few months' time, Mike. You'll hear all about that in September.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to be able to attract tourists to the best regions in the world. You know, the Margaret River and Kimberley and those areas. So I'm an absolute optimist.
And what would you suggest? You know, you've got Mark McGowan there. He's new. He's got a chance to do new stuff. How do you encourage growth, and how do you stop limiting growth?
Yeah, I'd let people get on with things. I mean, one of the best things I've done in Wesfarmers, and Mike Chaney would say the same thing, is let people get on with things. So, you know, if you want a creative, innovative environment, you can't have an environment where people get penalised for making mistakes. If they make stupid, deliberate, dumb mistakes, that's different. But if people are making mistakes because they're trying, then I think that's okay. And I worry sometimes in government that people get penalised if they stick their head up. Well, I'd be encouraging people to stick their head up and create the opportunities and the efficiencies and things to get better services. My adage is that the further a business is away from the head office, the better it performs, and sometimes the more management gets out of a business, the better it performs.
Right.
So and the other thing I'd say to Mark or anyone, you know, far be it for me to give Mark any advice. He's got, you know, a wonderful opportunity. Is surround yourself with good people. That's not yes people. That's good people, and people who will challenge and question and also let them have a bit of a go. So, you know, mistakes are okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And look, a really interesting comment there, because I guess given you've been running a Perth-based head office with so many of your key units.
Maybe that's the
somewhere
success
else.
of Wesfarmers.
Yeah,
That's right.
Well, maybe makes the UK look even more promising, doesn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah.
Look, I'm looking to the floor, but you know, I've got plenty of more to ask here. So, I mean, I guess one of the things I did want to ask is about the creep of regulation over your time. Has it been noticeable?
Yeah, I think it's. I think the default position in government and regulators is to regulate rather than let the market sort it out and let there be consequences rather than just regulate.
Right.
So right now in Coles we've got 16 federal government inquiries, 9 state and 4 from things like the Productivity Commission and the ACCC. And that's without all the other regulators who come into our businesses. So our last Coles board paper, I see that we had someone come in and tell us that a meat slicer we had was blunt. Now, you know, as a taxpayer, do I want to be paying for someone to come in and tell Coles that their meat slicer's blunt? Not really. Do I want regulators in Western Australia wandering around Bunnings saying you can't sell on a Sunday these indoor mats or these lights, but we can in New South Wales or Victoria? I mean, I think regulation, and it just creeps, and I think it's a burden, and you know, unfortunately, I don't think there's a great appetite to deal with it, because every time you deal with it, you get a squeaky wheel. But I really think we need to.
Yeah, there's a lot of squeaky wheels.
Yeah.
Peter Kennedy, not a squeaky wheel, Peter.
Richard, you might get a call from Cricket Australia to ask you to act as a consultant in their problems. But look, I'd like to ask you about wages. And you said you believe that Australia should be a high-wage country, which it is.
Yeah.
But where does productivity come into that? And also with a company like your own, a labour-intensive company, the Reserve Bank Governor the other day said that wage increases had been too low.
Yeah.
So what level of wage increases would you see as satisfactory before wages start to become a cost, or on the other hand, wages add to consumption?
Yeah.
What's the happy medium?
It's a great question, Peter, and I don't have the perfect answer other than one of the issues we've got at the moment is there hasn't been enough wages growth in Australia. And the way you fix that is through higher economic growth and greater productivity. And one of the reasons the Business Council continues to prosecute the case for a lower corporate tax rate for all businesses, not just small businesses, is because it's very clear that that will lead to more investment, and a lot of the benefits of that will flow through to wage earners. And there's actually no other policy on the table at the moment from either political party which would have that consequence, I think. So we do need wages growth that is highly linked to productivity growth. That can be through productive capital investments by businesses, through new innovation and the like. And business needs an environment that creates the desire to spend and take risks. So we've got economic growth. Australia's blessed. We've had 26 years of uninterrupted economic growth. We've had sectors that have had their downturns, and we've had states that have had their downturns, but as a nation we've got our way through it. And that's brilliant because people have generally retained their jobs. We haven't had an employment crisis. But I reckon we're at least 1% below where we should be in terms of growth nationally. And if we could get that through better tax policy, lower regulations, and a number of other things, and governments maintaining fiscal discipline, then I think we'd get that wage growth, and I think that'd solve a lot of issues that we're currently dealing with at the moment. Great, it's a great question, Peter, and that's it's a question that cabinets, state and federal, should be asking themselves. First question every meeting they have almost should be, if there's not a national security issue, that should be it.
There's a question from the floor here.
Richard, Roger Pell speaking.
Hi, Roger.
With our energy dilemma we have in Australia at the moment, sort of trading off all these drivers of cost, sustainability, reliability, and particularly since this is which prompted this question, with your expertise in trading off all of these pressures, what insights would you have for governments, for energy producers, and perhaps even consumers to get over this quagmire that I see that we've got with coming up with an energy policy?
Yeah, Roger. I mean, the only thing I'd challenge you on that question is when you talked about my expertise, because I don't think I have much, but I'll try. I think the most disappointing thing about what's happening in energy, particularly on the eastern seaboard, it was highly predictable. Everyone knew it was going to happen, and yet it hasn't been dealt with. And we're fortunate with different circumstances in WA, but we're fortunate in West Australia, certainly as an big energy user. Wesfarmers, we've got much lower energy costs in WA than we have on the eastern seaboard. And you would not believe how much money coal spends on energy and the increase in costs in that business. So I think the report that's come out recently, what's his name? Finkel, thank you. The Finkel report, the government's accepted 49 of 50 recommendations, and the one that they haven't, they've gone to do more work about is on the clean energy target, which is fundamental to the whole thing, and that's because it's political, and it's political within the government, and Bill Shorten's very helpfully saying he'll support the government, and that's all politics as well, I think. But that at least is an architecture to try and solve it. I mean, what we've done, having created a problem, what we've done is the right thing. We've put together a group of eminent people who know this space to come up with a solution. They've come up with a solution, and now it looks like it's possible that the politics will impede dealing with the issue. And so I think that's the problem at the moment. And I do think it's one of these things, you get a group of people in a room, you could probably sort it out if everyone left their vested interest at the door, but time will tell. It's a big issue, and it's going to become a bigger issue, and increasingly now we're seeing it flow through to families, mum and dad's families, and that's when it's going to become even a bigger political issue, I think. I reckon the solution's right in front of us. It's implement and get on with it. Have a clean energy target, and then don't back any technology. If you set your target, then everyone knows what that target is, and everyone can come forward. The private sector and others can come forward with the most efficient ways of generating the energy required at the most efficient way. So, but let's hope we get there.
Yeah, remarkable that WA 10 years ago had a gas crisis, and yet now we seem to have actually sort of resolved that, and it's all playing out in the east. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the reservation policy got a lot of criticism here at the time. Who knows? I may have criticised it at the time. I'm not sure. Carps tells me he's a genius for so.
There's a question from the floor here.
Richard, Michael McLean, Master Builders Association. How is your organisation dealing with more and more products from overseas and ensuring that they're compliant with Australian standards?
Yeah, Michael, it's a challenge. I mean, we have very good systems within all of our businesses, not just building products and Bunnings, but indeed in Kmart and Target and those businesses. You're talking about infant wear and things like that all need to be safe. So we've got good systems within the business. Occasionally we trip over. We've had one or two things in Bunnings, I think, that trip over. I mean, you see that manifest itself most horribly in the UK fire event of some months ago. So we take it seriously. We also try and support domestic suppliers, but you can't get that for all our products. So we've got significant resources committed to it, and to the sustainability of our sourcing as well. So I think our ethical sourcing, sustainable sourcing, and internal quality programs, he's looking for some wood to touch, are pretty good, but they're not faultless.
I thought we might get one more question. No one's asked anything about the footy, so I'm surprised.
Well, it's put a bit grim at the moment, isn't it?
Without any teams from here being in the
they're
finals.
both talking about transitions.
Yeah.
What does transition mean?
Yeah, the business world doesn't quite get to have that transition process every
No, you
time
don't.
things are going wrong, do they?
If you have to transition, usually the CEO gets fired. But anyway, not that I'm saying that should happen in football, by the way. I actually, yeah. I mean, we've, as I said earlier, footy's not in pretty good shape here, notwithstanding the weekly in and outs, and we've got an amazing new facility coming shortly as well, and two very well-run clubs. They are the least of our concerns in the AFL. I'll give you the...
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is probably the last question. Up at the back, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goyder. Very interesting. Felicity Morel, Edney Brown. I know you're passionate about the stadium, and it's wonderful that we're having $60 million spent on sporting infrastructure. How can business support cultural infrastructure throughout the state?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And in fact, I'm doing something tomorrow night at my old school, which is an art exhibition, and so I've been thinking about it in terms of in the context of saying a few words tomorrow night. And again, I'm passionate about this, and Wesfarmers is. So Wesfarmers has got a history, I think, of supporting the arts. We're the major supporter of the Symphony Orchestra and the opera, large supporter of the ballet, the art gallery, and other arts organisations in the community. It has been a really significantly good thing for us to do, and I think it's made a difference in Western Australia. And I was talking to the CEO of the City of Perth, Martin, the other day, and saying, over time I actually think the cultural life of Perth and Western Australia has improved and grown, and the Heath Ledger Theatre and the work performing arts and visual arts is doing, I think, are really good. But most of the arts organisations in Western Australia are underfunded. It's only going to get harder from government, and I do think individuals and business needs to do its bit. And I think the payoff is huge. Not just for Wesfarmers, it's been wonderful reputationally. Also, the staff engagement we get through these sponsorships is phenomenal. But also think about it with our children. You know, if you don't have a vibrant arts sector, then where are your music teachers going to come from at school? Where are your art teachers going to come from at school? And it actually feeds through the whole community. And if we want to be a creative and innovative community and society, then the arts have to be right up there, and they have to be well funded. So, you know, I think we've all, and it tends to get knocked about in an economic downturn, and I think we've got to sort of try and look through that, and make sure we do fund not just our elite sports people, but our elites anywhere. And the arts and again, we punch above our weight in the arts, and I think we've got to continue to do that and fund and create an environment that where young people who've got talent can flourish and grow, and the community's much better for it. So hopefully that'll continue. I've said to Rob, Rob, you're going to early on want to be focused on your work, but I tell you, the arts community in West Australia is going to be looking very carefully at where you are at and what you do. So that was the other piece of advice I gave him.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you, Richard. I've got, you know, another page or so of questions that we could go through. We could be here for another hour, but it's wonderful. So look, I would like to now invite Todd Mayers, Director of Churchill Consulting, to come up and give a vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. As Mark just said, my name's Todd Mayers. I'm a Director of Churchill Consulting. We're a West Australian-based management consultancy, and we help organisations with strategic change and performance improvement. Amongst our clients and the teams we work with, it does include Woodside and Wesfarmers, so fascinated to hear, as I'm sure you were, some of what Richard spoke about this morning. It's been thoroughly engaging and enjoyable. It's my pleasure to give a vote of thanks to Richard for that. And as I was listening to it this morning, I couldn't help but, as we were hearing about some of his pathways to success, think about that great Aussie movie, The Castle. And Dale Kerrigan in that, when talking about his dad Daryl's fishing, he was talking to someone, he said, Dad reckons that fishing is 10% brains, 95% muscle, and the rest is good luck. And there's probably been a bit of that, Richard, but mainly brains and muscle, I think, in your journey. We certainly wish you every success as you move on to new pastures. But what did we hear this morning? What were some of the key messages that we heard? As a CEO, we know that the mic is always on and that it's a marathon, not a sprint. We heard that when we consider Amazon, you reiterated the need for a level playing field, and I think that's important. You told us that Bunnings has been a CEO's dream, and I can tell you that in the chaos of my house on a Saturday morning, Bunnings is also a father's dream. And you told us that good leaders surround themselves with good people, not yes people, and that you've got to let them have a go, which I think is important as well. Lastly, and certainly importantly from Churchill's perspective, who has a giving back program, you challenge us all to support the WA arts sector, and I applaud you for that, and we should all take that away today. So as I close, I'm reminded of another great quote from The Castle, the eminent lawyer Dennis Denuto, who many of you will remember. And he said at the conclusion of his case, in summing up, it's the Constitution, it's justice, it's the law, it's the vibe. It's the vibe of the thing, Your Honour. I rest my case. Richard, this morning we've loved the vibe of the thing. It's been fascinating, and we'd better let you get to that audit sign-off meeting that you've got. And so it's with pleasure I have a gift for you here from the Rosabrook vineyard. It's called the Rosabrook Single Vineyard Cabernet, and it's kindly provided by the Calneggia family. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Todd, and thanks again to Richard and to Mark. One more round of applause, please, as they make their way. Okay, we're near the end, so once again I'd like to thank our host sponsor, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and our series sponsors. These are the people that make these events possible. Bupa, Brian Burke Homes, Churchill Consulting, EY, St Vincent de Paul Society, WA Super and the Hyatt Regency Perth. It's now time for the door prize. If you're the lucky person, you can come and see Rosemary after the event has concluded. This is for one night's accommodation in a Hyatt Regency Club King Room plus breakfast for two. And the lucky person, Frankie Galati from Galati Group. Well done, Frankie. As you leave, please leave your name tags on the table or in reception. I hope to see many of you at our next Success and Leadership Breakfast with Mike McKenna. Thanks very much for coming and have a good day.